Regular listeners of this podcast will know that we pride ourselves on the depth and robustness of our research, and this week is no different. We have scoured the internet, we've dived deep into the archives, and even took a trip to the British Library. And after all of that, I am very confident in saying that this week, Raith Rovers will come up against the only Championship manager ever to have been jailed for headbutting a Raith Rovers player. This is the Oh No 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 podcast, and we're here to look ahead to thuggish brute Duncan Ferguson's Inverness Caley Thistle against debonair gentleman Ian Murray's Raith Rovers. I am Duncan Cameron, and joining me this evening, first of all, we have Robbie Weir. How are you, Robbie?
Excellent, thank you.
Good. We have Blair Hopcroft. How are you, Blair?
Very well, mate. Thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And Leslie Maybon as well. How are you, Leslie?
Crack, no bad yourselves. Heading up to Inverness this weekend to take on the Caley.
Excellent. You're absolutely right. Rovers unbeaten in 9 now, and with the Caley Thistle hoodoo finally banished, the Rovers should really be kind of heading up the A9 full of confidence. Will you be sharing any of that confidence, Blair?
Yeah, weirdly, for the first time in 20 years, I don't really care. Like, we've already beat them, so the hoodoo's gone. We'll just kind of see what happens. No, I think we should be confident. I think we're in good form. Although I think they're in good form as well, so I think it'll actually be quite an interesting game.
I think so too. I think it's. I mean, I really hoped Duncan Ferguson was going to be abysmal and be just dreadful. That would have been the ideal scenario. But I mean, he does seem to have made a difference there. Ian Murray was saying in his interview today that he felt they were in a bit of a false position previously, and that he almost expected them to kind of bounce back. And Duncan Ferguson does seem to have made a difference. They do look to be better than they were under Billy Dodds. But that, I mean, Robbie, what about you? How are you feeling about just in terms of how do you feel about Caley Thistle at the moment before we get into talking about the Rovers?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Ian Murray had a point saying that they definitely were in a false position towards the start of the season. I don't think that, like, when we played them at Starks, they seemingly were a lot better than the games that they played before. So they were sort of turning a corner. Just coincidentally, they lose a goal 3 minutes from time against us and decide to punt one of the most ineffective managers in the league in the shape of Billy Dodds. Now, I don't know how much can lead too much into sort of what you hear through the grapevine, but the rumours were that Dodds wasn't very popular in the dressing room. Now, I don't know if players are going to fully exert themselves and completely give their all for a manager if he's been a bit of a dickhead. But yeah, the signing of David Weatherspoon as well seems to be obviously one which is trained with Dunfermline for what felt like about 6 months, then goes off and then starts scoring for fun up in Inverness, which really has helped them turn a corner. They've just got a squad it does have a lot of good players throughout it. I don't think anyone should be under any illusions, but at the same time, it's such a cutthroat division that I don't feel like I feel like as a team that we can go into these situations, like Blair says, with a degree of confidence that we've got these players that are now, we're seeing players coming back, and that on the Rovers side that you've got players finding form as well. So I feel like we should be going in with a degree of confidence. Plus, we are unbeaten and won against them. So the record's up against them now. So they need to handle that pressure.
I think you're absolutely right about the players they've got. They've got good players there. I'd maybe stop short of saying they've got like a decent squad. I think they've got a decent 11.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the drop-off in their squad is huge. I mean, they played Cowdenbeath in the Cup at the weekend there, and I think found it pretty hard going with the kind of second string that they started with. I think it was only really when they started putting their subs on that they got a bit of grip on the game. But David Weatherspoon's definitely made a big difference. I felt the last game at Starks, Billy Mackay is one of these guys who's just always a danger. Always, you can't, doesn't matter the 10 guys behind them. If they're not doing too much, he's always liable to do something. And I think Weatherspoon's the same. he's obviously got the quality, and that does mean that they're always going to pose a threat. But it will be interesting into the kind of back end of the game with the options that the Rovers have got, how much of a difference that could possibly make. Leslie, how are you feeling going into this one?
I've got a wee statistic here. So in 1993, the G League started in Japan, in Nagoya Grampus 8. This is why I've got the Nagoya Grampus jacket today. Nagoya went to the east of Japan to play Kashima Antlers, and they got pumped 5-0. And this initiated the Kashima Soccer Stadium curse. So for 22 games, over 15 years, Nagoya Grampus 8 never won a game in the Kashima Soccer Stadium until they finally beat the curse in 2008. That's on Wikipedia. The Raith Rovers Inverness curse is also on Wikipedia. And I would love to be able to log on at 5 PM on Saturday and edit it and say that we've finished it. Let's see. I mean, like the guys have said, I think we should go in with a good degree of confidence. You know, I went to the 2 games up at Inverness last season, and the second game in particular, we had Ethan Ross, who'd taken a bunch of painkillers, and Isma Gonsalves, who couldn't even be bothered warming up, and that was our options off the bench. You know, we're getting to with the kind of depth and quality we have now. You know, we know that we can put up a good fight to anybody. And I mean, you're going to have off days in the division, and you know, who knows? But I think I'm feeling a lot less anxious than I would have been for this fixture last season. Who knows what will transpire? But I'd like to think that we've got the depth, particularly in attacking positions, that you know we can change things up, we can try something different, and we can give it a good go for the 90.
I think you have to take confidence as well from the results in the last couple of weeks. So the last league game, Caley were at East End Park. They drew 1 each, but by all accounts, they were really second best in that one. Dunfermline had a ludicrous number of efforts come back off the woodwork. I think it was 7, and the goal went in off the post as well.
And we know how bad Dunfermline are.
Well, like I was just going to say, I think we're
terrible.
very well aware of just how dominant we were at East End Park on Friday night last week. So, again, you'd want to take confidence from that. And as much as Duncan Ferguson has kind of improved Caley Thistle, there's no real kind of standout results there. You know, they beat Arbroath 3-2. They drew with Partick Thistle, beat Airdrie 1-0, drew 1 each at Tannadice, which is, you know, is a good result. Beat
So
Ayr 3-1, which is fair as well. But there's nothing in there that's, you know, remarkable, really. There's nothing in there that would make you think, you know, that's a top 4 side. It's better than Billy Dodds was doing, but that's not necessarily a huge badge of honour. I think the other thing before we really dive into the Rover side and the various availability kind of queries we have, probably is worth mentioning the weather as well. It is very, very cold. So it's Thursday night as we record, and I think, Leslie, you've got sources on the ground in Inverness, and we're not expecting it to get much warmer between now and kickoff.
Right, my dad's worried about his courgettes. My dad is 10 kilometres from the stadium, and he says it's pretty cold there. We're talking minus temperatures. The forecast says it's not believed to get warmer really until Sunday. And I mean, like, clearly there's a difference between my dad's vegetable patch and a professional football pitch in terms of kind of maintenance and how they're looked after and things like that. And I don't know what the conditions are like at the Caledonian Stadium, but it's been pretty chilly. And as I say, the ground has been frozen, so we'll see what happens. I mean, you know, having grown up with trips down the A9 where I've got to the other end and found games being cancelled when we've got there from the Black Isle, I know it's no fun to come all the way up. So fingers crossed that a decision either way is taken pretty early.
Yeah, I was going to say, Blair, I think you in particular would like to make a plea to the SFA here if they're going to arrange an inspection.
Yeah, we're leaving Kirkcaldy at 9:30 on Saturday morning. So we've got a scheduled kind of stop in Aviemore for some food on the way up. So we've kind of left a wee bit earlier than we would normally, which is now seeming like a really stupid idea. But yeah, I mean, going back to the kind of the Billy Dodds to Duncan Ferguson thing, you just have to look at the results. You're right, there's no kind of standouts, but he stopped the rot. Like, they were toiling. They'd lost, I think they'd lost every game in the league apart from one. Am I right in saying they'd drawn with Dunfermline, and they'd lost every other game in the league until he came in, and they're now unbeaten since. And then you've got David Witherspoon, who's come in and is their joint top goal scorer, having only played 4 games. Granted, there's only 2 goals, but you know, that's a kind of an instant impact that he's made. And I think you're right. They're a decent 11, and I think if we can kind of nullify that, then you've got a chance. But this has got feelings of, remember the Arbroath game? We did the preview pod for a game that was never going to happen, and it didn't happen. And look at Arbroath now. Like, I'm happy we're playing Arbroath next week, or the week after, sorry, but we're not playing Arbroath
then
4 weeks ago. They were in a wee vein of form.
That worked out very, very well for us, that one. I mean, we could go up to Arbroath and get absolutely pumped on a new manager bounce, but even still, at the same time, they were in good form when that game was coming up, and then we gets postponed, and then it's chucked into the middle of December. So interesting to see how that pans out. But again, this might be one where if it gets postponed, Caley might drop off a little bit. So yeah, you never know, but just got to wait and see. Hopefully it is an early call. Duncan Williams is apparently the referee, so apparently let's see how his judgment is on this.
Yeah, it's I think the other thing that's been kind of a key to their turnaround, the guy they picked up from like the Australian non-league, the guy Billy Dodds, I think, actually signed them, or certainly was in charge. Yeah,
number 44, Ujja,
Nicola Ujdur, or however we're choosing to pronounce that. But one of these ones that when you see it come in, think there's not a chance he's going to be any use. Like, that, just no way that this guy's rocking up in Inverness from whatever New South Wales regional division he was in previously. But by all accounts, he's been very good. So I think I think it's one of these ones where Billy Dodds is a really odd one, because, as you said, Robbie, very clear that certainly their supporters and quite possibly their players had really turned against them. Obviously, his pals in the media were backing him to the hilt, but you do look and you think you could easily, if you were thrown into a debate, looking just at the facts, you could make a good case for Billy Dodds being really hard done by. I think a lot of it was in the grey areas where he was really just, things like, they had that Scottish Cup run, but they were handed a huge reprieve when Queen's Park were knocked out, so or were eliminated by the administrative division of the SFA.
Is anyone seeing Leslie's webcam at the moment, or is it just me?
I think it might just be you.
Yeah, it just looks like it's frozen. I don't know. So it must be being weird.
I was just sitting very still.
I don't know. It must be me. I'll take a screen recording of it and show you this bit. Aye. That's it fixed.
Yeah, I think you're right, Duncan. I think I think Billy Dodds had done a decent job over a long period of time with not an awful lot, actually. I mean, they're not a club that have invested massively in their playing squad or anything. I think they're also a team that kind of struggle to get people to go north. Like, it's a big ask. I remember what's his name? He was on loan at us for Rangers last season. Kai Kennedy, yeah, went up there and basically missed his mum, I think, and wanted to come home. Like, it's hard for them to get quality to kind of go north and stay there, I suppose. We talked about it with Ross County as well, but Duncan Ferguson's a funny one though. Like, in terms of him coming in, I think you said at the beginning, we all want him to be rotten. We want it to be. Do you know what? I want it to be Tony Adams. I want him to be dancing about and doing something stupid that we all get a laugh at. But there's a little bit of me that thinks, he's got a decent pedigree. Do you know what I mean? He's worked. I mean, he worked with Ancelotti. Like he's not a haddy. He didn't have a good time at Forest Green, but then they seem a bit batshit crazy, to be honest. So, like, is this maybe quite a good fit for him up there? It will certainly be interesting. And like I say, you just have to look at the run of results. And yeah, there's no great moments in there, but turning the tide, that's not just a new manager bounce. That's what 6, 7 games now without defeat.
Yeah, and it's not a division for big spectacular results either. To be fair,
No.
we know that as well as anyone. That if you can beat teams by a single goal every week, that's good going, and that's you can put really impressive results together just doing that. So let's take a look into this Rovers team then. So when we look sort of comparing to last weekend, Ewan Murray will come back in, certainly in terms of availability. Ewan Murray is available again following his suspension, but Ross Millen drops out for removing his jersey and 5 other pieces of shitehousery over the course of the season. So he misses this one out. And a question mark, a piece of Liam Dick is kind of shrouded in mystery, I think, up till now. So we know that he missed out last weekend. I haven't seen any kind of update whatsoever on that to say whether it's a really minor thing or a really major thing. I've not seen anything at all. So we could probably all agree that Kevin Dabrowski is going to start in goal, but in terms of who lines up in front of him, it's a real open book at this point. Neil asked Ian Murray again earlier on today about his back three versus his back four, and I don't think we got a solid answer on that either. My own thoughts are that he probably will just go back to a back four with who he's got available. But Robbie, let's start with you. Just stick to the defence for now, please, and give me your thoughts on kind of what you'd like to see and what you think Ian Murray might do.
Yeah, I think it's hard to really figure out what we will actually do, and to put a defence together as such. You've got Dylan Corrs, as you say, like we've got an extra week of training under Dylan Corrs' belt as well, so he'll likely be in contention, and then you've got Murray. So I'd start with Murray and O'Reilly at centre back, which again, obviously Scott Brown, we can come on to him when you allow for us to talk about something outside of the defence. Scott McGill maybe at right back. And then, I mean, again, you could potentially play Ewan Murray at left or right back. That's the thing. Because he's done it before with us. So we've not seen that yet this season. But again, it might be just horses for courses and we just go with that. We're putting in McGill to full back along with Murray, and then having Corr and O'Reilly. But again, is that thrown too much change at it? Do we even change the formation in the first place? I feel like our defence is an eternal enigma, just that keeps rolling on through game by game, and every single game, it just seems to change in the circumstances of which we're forced to come up with ridiculous solutions to problems.
Yeah, let me release my my iron grip on that conversation slightly, and we'll include the defensive midfield as well, because I think it is kind of intertwined. But that the way that you've just sort of outlined that defence is the same as I have, as I kind of sat down to look at it. I think McGill goes into right back. You get Murray and O'Reilly as your kind of your two. If Liam Dick's available, he plays as the only actual left back, senior left back who's there. For me, if Liam Dick's not there, I would play Callum Hannah, which I know is quite a big call at this stage, but I think the big advantage that we've got that we haven't had previously is that you've got the option of also playing both Scott Brown and Sean Byrne in your kind of base of midfield. And I think that just gives you a little bit more solidity and a bit more, kind of street wisdom in that side that you can maybe accommodate, a less experienced kind of fullback. But Blair, how about you? How are you thinking?
See, I'm kind of going the other way because who do you drop for Friday night? Like, honestly, based on that game and based on that performance, who do you take out to make room for all of this? So I actually think he'll go with Ewan Murray in place of Scott. Not Scott. Sorry, I'm going to just call everybody Scott this week. In place of Ross Millen. But I don't. I see him going to back three again. I mean, he might change up the midfield a little bit, but I think the thing I've spoken about for a few weeks as well is Scott Brown's become the centre half. How do you get him back in the midfield? There's no room for him anymore, and you can't drop him because he's great. So I really do not envy. I mean, what a great position to be in. How do I play in midfield? You know, Sean Byrne or Scott Brown. Like, it's a great problem to have. But no, I genuinely think he'll stick with the back three. I think I think Byrne will come back into the sort of holding midfield role, which I think gives you that solidity as well. But yeah, I kind of see him putting in a fullback who's not a fullback when he's got a system that can work.
It'll be interesting to see, because I think that's where your sort of your tactical analysis really will actually come into play. I think he felt comfortable doing it against Dunfermline because they don't really use wingers. I wonder if, and obviously I've not seen him play yet for Caley Thistle, but I wonder how they're using David Witherspoon. And actually, if you go with that system we used on Friday night, is he just going to immediately station himself out on one side, and then you've got a Callum Smith or an Aidan Connolly suddenly having to do a lot more work? But it's interesting more than anything else to see how that comes through. Les, what are you thinking again in terms of what you'd probably like to see and what you think we will see with the 3 versus the 4?
I suspect we might see the 4 again, and I think that Witherspoon might be the reason for that. A player of that quality being able to move about, and I mean, like you, I have to admit, I don't know how Inverness are using him, but having that kind of player of that quality up front who's clearly posing a threat, you're going to want to do something about that. In terms of how you slot everybody together, one thing I did wonder, Dan O'Reilly is a centre-back. He is, however, left-footed, and we did also see in the Dunfermline game that he's pretty handy getting forward and pretty handy, moving balls into the box with his left foot. We could use him as an auxiliary left-back, and then the path of least resistance becomes keeping Murray and Brown at centre-back. McGill is probably a bit more comfortable at right back than he is at left back, and again, we know what he brings if you have McGill at right back, is he's very confident going forward and getting into the box. And you've then got something where you've got players at the full back positions who are okay with getting forward, and you then bring Byrne back in, and that then frees up us to do more conventional things up front. The other thing you can do, if you start with a 3, you could then go to that formation depending on who you have. You can actually move people about without actually having to make any substitutions. We've got that flexibility. So the curveball I'm going to throw out is O'Reilly as a kind of auxiliary left back.
I think that is a very reasonable shout. Robbie, can you remember the stuff that Ben sent over from O'Reilly's time at Accies? Did they ever use him at left back? Remember that?
Don't think it was mentioned at all. But again, this is Raith Rovers this season. Anything can happen. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if we saw him at left back and it was a potential option. And then Ian Murray comes out and tells us that he played there in a under-15s game all that time ago. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be against it, but I haven't seen him, and actually paid attention once. Yeah, I agree. He looked, keen enough to get forward. He didn't look panicked when he was over the halfway line. He, hit the byline once, which for a centre half is pretty impressive. So, that could very well be the option. Ian Murray has tended to kind of slot midfield. Say that again, sorry?
Just so long as we don't end up in a Dave Mackay situation.
Well, that's what I was going to say. There is that Ian Murray, in contrast to John McGlynn, has kind of he's tended to slot midfielders in to these kind of roles rather than centre half. So drop a midfielder back rather than moving a centre half across. But it might well be that Dan O'Reilly's got the right sort of outlook, to be able to do that. Maybe he's not a meathead, I think is what I'm trying to say. Maybe he's more cultured than that, and he's able to get down that line. To answer your question, Blair, in terms of if you go to the back four, how do you make it all fit? I've ended up with Vaughan not in my starting 11. That's how I've made that fit, which I know sacrilege, but
Wild.
it's ludicrous. The options that are there when you're looking at trying to put a team together, if we kind of move into the forward end of the park, I've just realised I've put a whole thing together. I don't have Josh Mullen at all. I've just forgotten Josh Mullen. So
that's what I'm saying. Can you imagine going into training tomorrow and going, yeah, Vonnie, you know how you're now the top goal scorer in Raith Rovers history against Dunfermline, and how everybody loves you. You're on the bench on Saturday. Like, it's just, but it's the same with anybody. Like, it's that team on Friday night were so, I know we could easily do another 90 minutes, but that team on Friday were so good. I don't see how they change it. And there's a little bit of me as well that thinks what Murray got right at East End Park was he set up in a way that said, you need to worry about us more than we need to worry about you. And I kind of think he'll do something similar on Saturday. Like, yeah, they've got David Witherspoon, who's decent, but we shouldn't be worrying about them. They should be looking at our forward 4 or 5 or whatever it ends up being, and they should be shitting themselves.
I think you're right.
Point.
My concern would be that the 3-6-1 in particular is a sort of a non-repeatable trick, in as much as it was almost the surprise of it in itself. It was something I don't think we mentioned it on the last pod that we did, but even when the Rovers were warming up, they were warming up in a back four with Josh Mullen stripped as if he was going to play it right back.
We're 100% at it with that. We were 100% at it. It was great. Like, as soon as I was like said that, and it was like, nah, that's not happening.
But is this not the Panenka game? I stood at Hampden and I went, there's no way he's going to Panenka it, because everybody knows he's going to Panenka it. So everybody thinks he's going to do the 3-6-1. So he does the 3-6-1 because nobody thinks he's doing the 3-6.
He's playing 4D chess.
Yeah.
But, I mean, well, listen, I hope he does, for the spectacle, if nothing else.
Yeah.
But that, again, listen, we've talked about it enough times, but just the options in the front end of the park. I mean, not like I'm saying, the way I'd put it together, it's like, so you get kind of your 2 holding midfielders to protect that unfamiliar defence. It means that on the bench, I have Gullen, Vaughan, Smith and Mullen. 4 guys who could all absolutely make incredibly strong cases for starting that game.
That's,
all 4 of them.
The Scottish Championship equivalent of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
But that it's almost an embarrassment of riches in that front end of that park. And
I mean, there's no doubt that Byrne comes back in, right? I mean, you know what I mean? He missed out a game not through his own fault, and I know Murray's talked about this before about, you lose your chance and you have to earn your way back in.
What do you do when everyone keeps taking their chances, though? That's the problem. Like, Scott Brown, brilliant at centre back, so you put him into midfield. Oh, do you take out Stanton or do you put Byrne right back in? Well, if you take Byrne right back in, then who does Stanton kick out further up the pitch? Well, Easton was phenomenal last weekend. Vaughan was phenomenal last weekend and got a goal. And then on top of that, Mullen did really well. Connolly's been fantastic. And there's no way you're taking Jack Hamilton out that side.
I know John's not here, so we can say Blair and I can talk about ice hockey without getting a ban. But I think if you're Ian Murray, you almost have to talk to the attacking players and think of it kind of as if it's like ice hockey. So if you think about how ice hockey works, you don't have your star players out all the time until they get knackered and then bring other ones on. You know, you've got lines and you switch people about, and you know, over the course of a game or a season, everybody comes in, does a shift, does a role. It might be that your job is to come on and go hell for leather 10 minutes one time, then you might be brought in and doing something else another time. So almost the kind of the message that you'd think Ian Murray might be having to get out to our attackers is, look, you're all going to be needed. If we've got any hopes of keeping up with Dundee United and having a real crack at the playoffs, you are all going to be needed. You're all going to be starting at some point. We're going to have injuries. We're going to have suspensions. We're going to have guys just needing a rest, you know, and just keep managing that and realising, you know, you're all going to get a crack at some point, but some of you might slot together in different ways and different combinations at different times, and we just have to do what we need to do at any moment.
You mentioned ice hockey there. I thought you were going to suggest we just pull the goalie and just get an extra attacker on that way.
Only if Kev just goes up front, to be fair.
Well,
No, unless they probably get a hat trick.
But that, no, I think you're right, Leslie. And even in within individual games, 5 subs lets you do that in a way that you couldn't have done 5 years ago. And I think that was very much in Ian Murray's mind when he was building the squad. I remember him talk about it in the summer, the game we played against Dundee. It's like they made 3 changes at half time and we didn't have any. And that's where in this, I mean, again, we've said it enough times, but like if this game's tight going into the last 20 minutes, the options that we'll have on the bench, it's not a second string. It's a second first string. It's you know, replacements that are as good as the guys that are coming in, which is particularly with this Caley Thistle team is not the case. They don't have that kind of depth. Almost to the point where I think, although they would never say it, if you're that Caley Thistle team going into this game, I think you're looking at it thinking, we need to be at least 2 up going into the latter stages because the firepower that can come off the bench is so great. You know, you're not going to get an easy time in the kind of dying stages. Is there anything else we want to kind of throw in for this game before we get into predictions?
Yes, I just want to come back to something I picked up a little bit earlier, and that's just to contrast this game with the team that we had the last time we were up at the Caledonian Stadium at the end of last season. A game that we finished with 10 men on the pitch because Isma Goncalves went down, having not warmed up, and had to be carried off by 2 men. You know, we finished that game with 10 men. We played the first 70 minutes with Willie Accio up front, effectively like a Roomba vacuum cleaner, programmed on a figure of 8 around the 18-yard line.
Which is like playing with 10 men.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, my dad has been out of Fife for a long time. You can tell when he gets really angry, his Kirkcaldy accent comes back. And he was watching Willie Accio, and he's like, what's going on up there? You could have any of us up there running about in a pink t-shirt. He doesn't ken fit his day in. And you know, the rage came back. But, you know, you contrast that now with what we have now, like we're just saying. Guys like Callum Smith, Jamie Gillan, who've done nothing wrong and haven't put a foot wrong when they've been put in the park, are sitting on the bench. And it's a real testament, I think, to the recruitment and the work that's gone on over the summer that we've got to this position.
I think maybe need to put a little bit more respect on Willie Accio's name here. I think last time I checked, he was the top scorer in the, whatever it is, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Premier Division, the Tim Hortons Championship. Just a ludicrous. The players in that Canadian league are wild. Guys like Fraser Aird as well. I think last seen in Scotland, he was kind of struggling to get a game for Cove Rangers, and is now like a mainstay in the team at the top of that division. Yes, I am glad that we're no longer subject to Willie Accio. Spectacular somersaults aside. Well, one somersault.
Just the one final thing on this game. I'm talking about they should be more worried about us than we should be at them. But actually, do you know the fact that, and I think it's something John Greer raised a couple of weeks ago, but the fact that we are sitting here and we have no idea what Ian Murray's going to do. Duncan Ferguson's not got a hope. Like, he can't possibly know what they're going to do, because we watch them every week and we don't know what he's going to do. Do you know what I mean? So that's got to be a positive in itself, because I mean, you can watch the warm up and you still might not even know what they're going to do. So
the data on our Y Scout account must be fucking wild. Like, I'll say that. Like, it must just be like a random like assortment of like just the data from it would be ridiculous. But I think what's for me, you look at the next 4 games, where we've got Caley away, Partick at home, Arbroath away, Dundee United away, and you're thinking, right, let's fucking go. Let's see what happens in these next 4 games. And it might go completely tits up. It might go absolutely fantastic. I'm just here for it, because just what a season so far that things have been. And it's great to see sort of this team really clicking together in the last few games, that you go into that with a degree of hope and sort of belief that they can potentially get results out of these huge games. So yeah, interesting to see.
Definitely. And in terms of the hope and the belief, where is that taking you for a prediction for this one, Robbie?
I'm going to go. I'm completely, after all this chat about not knowing what our lineup is going to be and not having a clue who will be in defence, I'm going to go a 3-2 Rovers win.
Sounds good. Blair, what about you?
So same starting team as Friday night, with Millen out and Murray back in. And I think Byrne will come in, and I think probably we'll lose Josh Mullen. God, I'm all over the place today. Josh Mullen. And I think we'll beat them 2-1.
Blair, I wouldn't worry about it. I was tripping out about Leslie's webcam, and I'm slightly suspicious someone struck my tea. So,
And Leslie, what about you, prediction-wise?
Prediction-wise, I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw. I think we're playing against the team who, along with us, apart from Dundee United, have conceded the fewest goals and have scored among the fewest as well. So I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw and hope that I can be editing the Wikipedia page come Saturday evening.
I think we've all kind of tempered our expectations now, where we're just happy that our league games aren't going to be decided by more than a single goal, because I'm going to go for 1-0 Rovers, which is the extent of the optimism I can allow myself for a game up in Inverness. But certainly will be an interesting one, and I think it's a big test for Duncan Ferguson, this Caley team as well. They're coming out of new manager bounce territory and into just what can you actually do over the longer term. So definitely an interesting one. And it is today as we record it, it's Thursday as we record it, it's St Andrew's Day today, and that's going to play a part in our big question. It is also incidentally my dad's birthday, so happy birthday, Dad. But in honour of the patron saint of Scotland, my big question for this evening is all about Scots. Robbie, I'm going to come to you first. You can start us off. What I would like to know here is a couple of notable Scots for you, please, in terms of the Rovers. So maybe your favourite and your least favourite, please.
Favourite at the moment is quite easy, because the man who's just stepped into centre half and taken it in his stride, no complaints. Scott Brown, just phenomenal. I don't think we really expected when he signed from Peterhead. Like, we knew that he was going to be a good player based on the reviews, but I don't think we realised like how good he was going to be. He's just been outstanding for like the last year and a half. And again, he's one of these players that probably, when you sign players like Dylan Easton, Jack Hamilton, for example, like, they're going to grab a lot of the headlines when they do get the goals. But Scott Brown just works so industriously in the middle of the park, or whether he's at centre back. And like I said in the post-match against Dunfermline, it's at the point now where we don't really question that he's at centre back, because he just looks very, very complete. Sort of just almost sort of conditioned to play there now. Like, just knows what he's doing, very comfortable. You're not really as worried. After that Dundee United game, just a huge sort of surge in confidence in him. So fair play to him. But yeah, just again, very much like Sam Stanton in the way that he comes across as quite a almost unassuming guy. Just goes about his business, seems a very like consummate professional, and it's I'm very glad that we were the full-time club that was able to get him to go full-time, because he had a lot of offers over the last few years up until he signed for us. So yeah, Scott Brown is going to be my favourite. For my least favourite, I would have to say he went on to have a sort of successful career, I guess you could say, across the sort of lower tiers of the SPFL after leaving us. But for me, it would probably be Scott McBride. I just like, he came in from Cowden Beef, and I think we were expecting a sort of flashy winger, but it just never really worked out for him. Again, he was probably quite young at the time, and just for me, yeah, it wasn't what I was expecting in terms of how it worked out. I'm sure he would probably, with hindsight, sort of point at different things, but always, yeah, just always remember, just sort of like Partick Thistle away, I think it was, when like seeing Heath came on and you're just thinking, oh, I don't know if we're going to get anything from this, but yeah, nothing personal against you, Scott. It's just you were just had the misfortune to be named as the same as St Andrew's Day. So yeah, it just sorry, you were the one that came to mind. Nothing personal.
Yeah, with his I think his bright yellow boots that really did his talking for him before he stepped on the park.
Walking on thin ice here as well, because he's a local lad as well. So, but as I say, he did go on elsewhere and like.
I remember his
semi-successful career.
Sure, it was his debut up at Alloa. Now, I used to play sevens at KHS, and I remember one night, I don't know if it was, I used to help out with a mate's team in like a six-a-side league. I can't remember if it was that or a seven-a-side game, but I saw this player on the pitch next to us, and he was incredible. Like, he was so far ahead of everyone else, and it was Scott McBride. So then he signs for the Rovers, and I remember I'm sure it was up at Alloa, and he made his debut, and he fell over the ball. And it was that moment when I realised just how far away I am from being a professional footballer, because he was brilliant, and he just, for whatever reason, it didn't work for him, but he looked a mile off the level that the team were at that point.
I always find that like quite an interesting thing when you see the levels of football, and like, for example, like Rovers, when we played like last season, you see Rovers and they'll scud like a Diddy team, and then Rovers last season go away to Ibrox and they're just passing the ball about the pitch, just maintaining it. We put in a really good account of ourselves that day. A few, like the second goal in particular was quite unfortunate, cannoning off Ryan Nolan. But like, you see the time on the ball that they've got and like just the ability. And then you see Liverpool go to Ibrox and they absolutely maul them. And you're thinking, by God, it's like a million miles away from like, in terms of like the differences in technical ability and fitness and just the conditioning for the players. And that's not a slight against anyone as well at like our level, because again, as you say, Blair, you look at like your average Joe compared to like a professional footballer in like League One, League Two, and it's so far away, and you think, Christ, these players are just exceptional when you get to that level. Like, it's top 0.0001% or whatever.
I played five-a-sides once against a guy who was a centre half at Montrose, and he was released at the end of that season when they were in League Two, and he might as well have been Ronaldo for like this game of five-a-sides. It's just exactly that, just levels, like timing the ball, that kind of stuff, and it was just like, I mean, listen, I'm the anyway, but it's again, just the difference in that, and it really kind of gives you just this kind of slightest inkling of like what it takes to just make it at, you know, a relatively low level.
So there's me slaughtering Scott McBride when I've never kicked a ball professionally in my life. And I'm sure that that's what I've had that before from ex-players, where like you slaughter them and then like they've maybe done a name search and they're like, what the fuck are you on about? And it's like, you know what? Fair enough. Absolutely spot on. Like, hold my hands up. But aye.
Leslie, your notable Scots, please.
Right, so I'm going to put a wee word out for the other Scot in our current team, Scott McGill, just because he's a young player. He's come in, and we've asked him to do a lot this season, and he's not always had to do things that he's had a lot of experience doing, and not often had a lot of things to do that are top of his skill set. But he's come at everything with a really positive attitude. He's got stuck in, and he doesn't hide when things go wrong. So just a wee word for the other Scot in our team. In terms of Scots that are less memorable, I'm going to go for two Scots from the early 2000s. Jockey Scott being one, our manager, Scott Crabbe being the other. I mean, Scott Crabbe particularly didn't do anything particularly bad. You know, he was maybe coming towards the end of his career when we had him. He wasn't particularly awful, but it was just what they represented and that kind of void of nothingness that you had around the early 2000s, where you know, like you'd go for whole seasons where nothing would happen. You can't remember any players, and like nothing of any consequence at all even happened. And you know, there's just a whole kind of blank void. So for just for those two, because they remind me of that period in time. Just one more thing though, in absolute terms, remember when I was a student, I had Championship Manager, and I got I think what the cool kids call a regen. So you know, a player that the computer invents because he'd been playing too long. And there's this guy that I got at the Rovers called Scott. And Scott was incredible. Scott went straight into the team. So we had a back four. We had Hugo Lloris in goals, and then we had a back four. We had, I think, it wouldn't have been Virgil van Dijk, but it would have been whoever might have been Daley Blint or even Danny Blint, alongside Ian Davidson, Vincent Talio, and some left back, and then this guy, this Scott sitting in front of them, winning the Champions League for us. So in absolute terms, in my own little universe, he's the greatest Scot ever.
The greatest Scot is Scott, which is fitting. I like that. I like that a lot. So I'll give you mine. I have a little word for Scott Robertson, who kind of represented us in not a particularly kind of glamorous period, and he was injured for a long part of it. But I think he was one of these guys who, when he's out injured, you don't, not that you would grudge it for anyone, but like you're desperate to get him back, because when he was fit and when he was available, you could see how much of a cut above he was. It was almost a kind of sort of proto Sean Byrne for the way that he would control the game, and you could see how good a footballing brain that he had. I think it's a shame as much as anything that I don't think we ever really saw the best of him.
I really felt sorry for him as well, because when he got chucked into that, it was Brechin, wasn't it? The game where we went down. He should never have played. He was not fit, and it was a horrible way to end.
That was the only 60 minutes he played all season.
Yeah,
and it was it really kind of harshly treated by circumstance as much. When one of those circumstances being Gary Locke, to be fair, but yes, a very good player for us, and one that I think, had he had better luck with injuries, could have made a real difference. And for my least favourite Scot is Scott Agnew. And to be clear, not for anything that he did while he was assistant manager. I was actually delighted when we appointed him assistant manager, because it meant he would finally stop scoring against us. Just felt like there was obviously James Keatings, who I think finished up with something like 11 goals in 16 games against us. Scott Agnew, I think, was more like 10 or 11 goals in 20 games, but every single one of them was a belter. Just like, you could not give him any time at all, because he would just, like, he's kind of wandering about in the middle of East Fife midfield and be like, well, what's that? Is that the ball? Is it? Right, ping, top bag. Just like endlessly frustrating. And yeah, just one of these ones where, like, going to just sign him so that he stops doing that for as much as anything. So a lot of kind of grudging respect for Scott Agnew, because I thought, pound for pound, possibly the most entertaining player you could watch if you only watched Rovers games and he only played for the opposition.
Yeah.
And Blair, your picks, please.
So I'm going to do it the other way around, because I want to finish on a high. I don't want to end this podcast talking about Scott Roberts. He is definitely one for me, and I hope he's no listening, because I'm not going to be that kind. He was awful. I was another one of those Rangers loanees that came in and didn't really. I'm not actually. Did we? This is where my memory fails me. Did we not get him in some kind of weird exchange deal?
He was the bag of bibs in the David Bates deal.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, because he was on loan, and then they effectively says, "Oh, you can have Ryan Hardy," which are like, that's fair enough. Jordan Thompson, we're like, And then you had Scott. Oh, for fuck's sake! It was it's the David Brent at the pub when he gets put up for the blind date. That was effectively it. He just turns around. And goes, oh Christ! But
he just was not very good. And I remember it's like as you get older and you think back to some of the things that you said at games or shouted at games and stuff, and one that sits with me, and I'm not proud of it. I'm genuinely not proud of it. But Dumbarton away, we were getting beat. I can't even remember the game. Getting beat, and Scott Roberts had given the ball away about a dozen times. And I just lost my shit. Stood up, and it was at Dumbarton as well. You're right on top of the game, and it's quiet. And the ball went out, and I shouted something about him being really shit, and then said, "You're going to be playing juniors in a year." And as soon as I said it, there's a boy about 3 rows in front of me, turns around, and it's well out of order. And I'm like, "I'm no wrong, am I?" And he went, "Well, I'm his dad, so I."
I knew that one was coming.
I was like, "Oh, sorry, mate," but yeah, I mean, I was nearly right. He ended up at Annan, so I mean, it's as close to juniors as you
Pretty sure I thought he was dropped out of the SPFL by now, but
he's at Broomhill now.
But he was rotten.
Great point, though. Great point there, Blair.
Yeah, but I'm gonna finish on a high, because it's a really easy one because he's Robbie's pal, he's the other Robbie's dad. The greatest goalkeeping masterclass that we've ever seen in a Raith Rovers jersey, Mr. Scott Thompson, who obviously saved that penalty from that Celtic captain in that game. Legend.
Absolutely.
I wonder if James McPake's middle name's Scott. Scott, fuck all out the last 3 derbies, lads.
To be fair, I was going to lead with Scott Byrne, but yeah, we'll stick to Sean instead.
The last thing we need is more complicated first name shenanigans.
Just call everyone Scott. Just give
Scott.
Yeah, that would make this easier.
Can we just one moment though, that the one Scott we haven't mentioned of this parish, Mr. Scott Fleming, is clearly the greatest Scot.
That's true. That is very true.
Yeah, we all got put on a verbal warning in the WhatsApp chat, like, careful you. Or I did at least. I don't know, I'm getting slaughtered tonight.
So, on that note, we will bring this episode of Oh No, No, No to a close. So if you were listening, thank you for listening. If you were watching, thank you for watching. We will be back on Sunday, as long as this game actually goes ahead, with a review of what has happened. If the game doesn't go ahead, we might still get a review from Blair on whatever he's had to eat in Aviemore for absolutely no purpose. But either way, we will be back with the next episode, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.
Just before we go, I just want to say that Spotify kindly sent over the rat for the year. Now, this podcast's been going for 61 days, and we have top podcast for 63 people. So whoever you are, and I know one of them, Stephen Loffer, who put out obviously his tweet saying that we'd overtaken Louis Theroux, which is great company to be in. Yeah, just thank you to everyone for liking, sharing, and subscribing to the podcast. When you see stuff like that come through, it's really obviously good, considering that we are relatively new on the scene. So yeah, thanks again for taking the time to listen, and got big plans for next year. Maybe not too big, but we've got ideas in our head. So thanks again for all your support.